Okay, I'm going to start recording before the guest is here. I don't normally do this, but we just got news that the Senate Appropriations Committee did not include the Copperwood grant. And I texted Tom, and here he's coming.
Good morning, Seth.
Morning, Tom.
How's
A
it going?
very good morning to you today.
Yeah, yeah, pleasant news.
It's so good to see you. Thank you for just jumping on this morning. So we're going to get right into it here. Um, Everybody's been tuned in really closely this week, and you have been down in Lansing, you know, making the pilgrimage from your home in the Western UP. We spoke all the way back in the spring about this movement to protect the Porkies that you have spearheaded from the beginning, creating the petition, creating the website. This journey has led us to this morning in Lansing, where the final meetings of the Senate Appropriations Committee took place. And this $50 million Copperwood grant was left out of it. And I popped open my Instagram stories this morning. I'm thinking about it. It's on my mind. I'm thinking, okay, what's Tom got to say? There's a new story. The first thing I see is Tom's got his hair down. So my heart soars, my nervous system smiles. And so I shoot you a text and you're available, and here we are. So let's talk about this. How you feeling?
Yeah, I mean, letting the hair down was meant to be symbolic, a message to the good people that we can all relax, maybe not forever, but at least for a while, relish this moment of victory. Seth, you were around at the beginning of this grant saga when it first passed through the Michigan Strategic Fund. We organized loads of people to speak up against it. And then we saw a similar outcome where it passed through the House, only to be blocked by the Senate in June of this year. And we thought, hopefully this is game over, but we left the door open to the potential that this could be revived and we need to revisit it. And that is exactly what has happened again. Um, so, first, what we saw in the House meeting last week is that even though there was tremendous pushback, even more this time than the first time the grant was proposed, because the Copperwood grant was bundled together with three other funding proposals, lawmakers were not able to vote on it individually. So even if they had opposed the Copperwood funding, they would have had to have rejected all those other proposals. It was not a very transparent or democratic way of doing business. So we were disappointed to see it pass through the House, but then we kept up the pressure. And to be honest, we'd been focusing on the Senate a lot more than we'd been concentrating on the House, since they proved to be the adults in the room last time around. We were banking on them, following through with that wisdom. We presented to them our petition of now over 300,000 signatures. We presented to them a letter signed by over 70 organizations, including Title Track and a number of others. We presented to them also a letter signed by over 100 residents of Gogebic and Ontonagon counties, just to counter that narrative of universal community support. And then I went to Lansing personally. Jane Fitkin from Citizens for a Safe and Clean Lake Superior also went to Lansing in person. We did some lobbying with the House reps and the senators and had as many conversations as we could. And then what we saw yesterday is the Senate Appropriations Committee met, and they did what the House was unable to do. They separated all of those grant proposals out, and they approved absolutely everything on their desk except for Copperwood. And we wanted to declare victory, but there was one other meeting scheduled for this morning. I didn't sleep last night because I was anxious about how that meeting would go. And then first thing in the morning, I received an email saying that the meeting was canceled. So, and we've now heard confirmed from a few reputable sources that we can interpret this as a second rejection of the grant. The way that the lawmakers do business is they don't vote on something unless they have the votes to approve it. So it would have been, more satisfactory to see our lawmakers simply vote to reject the grant, but that's not how they do business. So this is the best possible outcome, to have the grant simply blocked again and swept under the rug. There's always the chance it could be reintroduced again next year, but I think our movement has grown even bigger and more powerful than before. And I feel confident that we will be able to step up to the plate anytime we have to, and that this mine will not be receiving Michigan's money. We've told everybody, of course, it can continue advancing through a little thing called the free market, and we don't have total control over the free market because it is free. However, we have sent a very strong message to investors today that this project is not welcome in Michigan. It doesn't have the social license, it doesn't have the support of the people. And that is going to be a very powerful message in dissuading present and future investors from giving this project their cash. And that is how projects like this can ultimately be defeated. They are delayed, delayed, delayed. Eventually, they shrivel up, and the funding is gone, and they have to pack up shop and go elsewhere. So that is perhaps the course that we will be pursuing until another opportunity opens the door.
Well, bravo, and thank you so much for all of your continued efforts and your keen strategies all the way throughout. The initiative has deployed this really transparent, decentralized effort that has worked every step of the way, and the way that information has been disseminated every step of the way, through social media and through the website, has really helped people track it and to engage effectively. And it's been incredible to see the numbers grow around this movement and to see thousands and thousands, hundreds now, hundreds of thousands of people learn about it and take action. And the agency that an individual can feel becomes apparent, like that thin line between, like, wow, I hope that this goes well, versus like, I'm going to help make sure that this goes well. That has made all the difference. So it's like, it's a story for people to lift up, to say, like, we can make a difference. It is hard to stand up to the corporate hellscape, and it is difficult to resist fascism, the merging of state and corporate powers, and how deeply entrenched our nation states are in this merging of state and corporate powers. But at the same time, there is no way that this would have happened without people power. It is people power that kept that money from leaving, our state government and going into this foreign entity to do metallic sulfide mining on the shores of our fresh waters and in our pristine wilderness. Obviously, people heard this story and it made sense to them. And so here we are, being able to savor a hard-earned victory. And to me, it gives me goosebumps, because this is what it's all about. Like, I live for this. People standing up against all odds and making an impact. And at the same time, we have to keep going. So, like, what's your mentality here as we orient to, continuing to stay engaged with this?
Yeah. Well, I'm really, this whole time I've just been pulling ideas out of a hat. So, I found myself in this position simply because my family and I were the only folks who really lived very close to the mine site. And so we thought the least we could do was start a petition, start a website, put the information out there, and then just see what happens. So that's going to be what we continue to do, is act as the messenger and as the connective tissue for all of these other folks to come together. I kind of imagine it in my mind as the way mycelia works, like, we see a mushroom above the ground, but that is not the full story. The full story is what happened invisibly underneath the ground, when you have all these different strands of decentralized nodes that are reaching out and connecting with one another. And once you have a certain density of connections, that's when the mushroom sprouts. And that's when we get people willing to take action, not just to be in conversation, but to walk the walk. That's what we saw today. That's what we saw the last time the grant was rejected. That's what we've seen when people spoke up to challenge the mining company's air pollution permit. That's what we saw when people participated in our Gitchigaming water walk, when we had members of 7 tribal nations and loads of non-native allies carrying water to the shore of Lake Superior. So I just want to open the door for as many possibilities for people to not just feel angry, not just feel frustrated, but actually to take action. Because for me personally, taking action has been so liberating, and it's such a wonderful way to not be angry, because now you are actually immersed in the present moment and you're building community with others, and you're doing something that's worth doing. So we don't know exactly what hurdles we will be confronted with in 2025, but we'll just look for a way to keep that mycelia growing, keep the network growing, because who knows if we're actually going to be able to stop the Copperwood mine when it's all said and done. We might be able to stop one company, but that copper is always going to be in the ground. There could be another company that comes along and another company after them. And maybe the forces of the corporate agenda will be such, and the morality will be so low that we see, you know, uh, it's just too much for us to be able to handle. But I don't think that's going to happen. But even then, if we have the network that was built, we have all of these people who have come together, they will be able to respond proactively to so many other issues. Um, it's like, again, I keep going back to the mushroom analogy because I think it's a great analogy for decentralization. You might have that first mushroom get stomped down by some hiker in boots that it doesn't notice it's down there. But as long as the mycelia survives, next time you get a good strong rain, you might get an even larger flush. You know,
Yeah.
maybe we don't stop this mine, but we do something even bigger as a result of this connection that is
Yeah.
being built. But I'm feeling confident now that we've got tens of thousands of people who are willing to put boots on the ground. And I think we will see that the Copperwood mine never sees the light of day.
Yes. Yes. And that mushroom analogy is so poignant too, because as I understand it, the biggest mycelial network, the largest mycelial organism in the world is in the Western UP. There's that giant mycelial carpet that's like miles long. That is this one giant organism that represents thousands of acres of forest and millions of individual organisms. But yeah, it feels so good to be a part of. And I love that you said that it's been liberating for you. And, I've watched the way you've moved through this whole thing, and it's been inspiring on so many levels. And I've watched, from my perspective, wizardry unfold. And like what you're saying, you're sort of coming up with ideas and iterating in them, and looking at a situation and seeing what possibility is there. It's like, okay, this is not ideal. I didn't move here expecting to be neighbors with this giant mine. And yet the first sort of step is, okay, acceptance. Like, this is something that's been proposed here. They're already starting to work. But I've seen you sort of look at what possibilities are in front of you at any given time, and then use imagination and creativity with like really sound strategies and like very clear instructions for people to mobilize, and very like as easy as possible for people to take an action. And then again, another action, usually one or two actions, not like, hey, you can do whatever you want. Here's 20 different ways to do this. It's like, we want you to do this right now. This would be most helpful. And it's been magical, really, to watch it unfold, because the numbers keep going up. More and more people start learning about it. And the narrative and the talking points are consistent enough for people to be able to repeat to the people around them. And the action points are simple enough for people to clearly spread them, that, you know, you all have engaged in so many different ways effectively over a long period of time where not only has there been no waning of engagement, but there's just been exponential increase in engagement. And you've used social media so effectively and found other influencers to join the cause and to use their talents. Really beautiful art has emerged from it. Um, you've tapped into like population centers in the upper Midwest that have like really helped explode it when people in Detroit and people out of state have started to lift it up. That's been great. But one of the things I want to explore with you is the lobbying, because I think, fundraising and lobbying are things that are so important to our movement to protect Mother Earth and to tend to the fires of our shared humanity amidst a growing corporate hellscape. And people need to learn how to do those things confidently. And you just met with all these senators. I saw pictures of you with senator after senator where you both have smiles on your faces. So, like, you have had to do a lot of things that I'm imagining you just figured out. You trained yourself, you studied it, and then you decided, I am going to do this. I'm giving myself permission to try. Let's talk about the lobbying of the senators and how that led to them not approving this grant. Like, what's your process there?
Yeah, that was my first time. I never imagined myself lobbying politicians, but we were invited down by the Michigan League of Conservation Voters. They suggested that we do some in-person lobbying, and I met in their office early one morning. They helped us print off some materials, and they gave me kind of a fast tutorial on how to present myself to lawmakers. I thought I was going to be able to, give this big presentation and show them all these slides. And they said, no, you've probably got about 30 seconds to get them interested in what you're talking about. Lansing is super busy, especially this time of year in what's called the lame duck session after the big election, but before the new year when fresh politicians come in. So they've got dozens of different items on their tables to get them to really want to engage with an issue. You need to have something snappy. You need to have a melodic hook that's going to get the listener to want to stay engaged. So, our allies at the League of Conservation Voters, they brought us around to a few meetings and told us how to go about asking for representatives and senators to come out of those meetings. There's like a little card, and these are all steps that anybody can do. You don't have to be part of a organization or a campaign. Anybody listening to this can go to the Capitol building and do exactly what I'm describing. You can go to the sessions when the House is meeting, when the Senate is meeting, and then you can fill out a little card and ask for any lawmaker to come out and speak with you. You write your name, you write your topic, and then the lawmaker can choose whether they really want to come out and engage or not. We had some lawmakers who didn't follow through, others wanted to come out and chat. Some of them I spoke to for 2 minutes, others for 15 minutes, depending on how much time they had. Uh, part of it is our lawmakers are running from one meeting to the next. If you can even jump in front of them in the hallway and say, Senator, Representative, a quick moment of your time. I have a petition of over 300,000 people who do not want you to fund a foreign company's metallic sulfide mine in the heart of one of our most cherished areas. Do you have a moment to speak? You give them, lawmakers like big numbers, right? So 300,000 signatures over a quarter a million, that's saying something. And then, you know, um, I already sort of knew what the concerns were that would lead to our legislators potentially justifying this grant. Jobs in the UP, economic revitalization, the idea that this infrastructure, such as the power grid, would be helping the community even though there's no humans that live within 5 miles of the mine site. So I already had like the key bullet points that I knew I wanted to present to lawmakers. And then uh, Jane Fitkin from Citizens for Safe and Clean Lake Superior, she went down the week following and also spoke with representatives and senators. And it was her first time as well. And you really learn as you go. In the beginning, you feel very anxious and you don't know exactly how things are going to come out, but it goes fine. Once the ball gets rolling, you build up confidence. I would encourage anybody to go to Lansing and pull out the lawmakers from their meetings, to grab them in the hallways. You can also visit their offices. And if you don't get to speak with the legislator directly, you can have a conversation with their secretary or their chief of staff and leave them some materials. Uh, you know, I appreciate all of your compliments about our strategizing and all the work we've done, but the bulk of the work was done by Lake Superior herself and the Porcupine Mountains, because people already love that area. That is already such an amazing place. All we really had to do was remind folks that this was an area worth fighting for. But there are incredible life forms all around Michigan and beyond, even in places that are not protected state parks. So anytime somebody has a chance to speak up for a stream or a patch of forest or a wetland or a lot in the neighborhood, which could become, a community farm rather than a new apartment complex, right? We don't want to just speak up for the Porcupine Mountains. We want to fight for every single patch of green area and wildness, both without and within ourselves that we can. And politicians will not necessarily listen to us unless they hear from us in incredible numbers. And that's why it's important for us to stay united and to keep building this chorus louder and more powerful.
Yes, absolutely. And as I've studied these movements through the past and learned from elders, this movement had a lot of the essential ingredients that other successful movements in the past have had. It's messaging that reminds people of their personal connection to a place and why it's important to them, why it's important to our identity and our shared survival. And and then there's sympathetic people in the press, like journalists that can work with this story and give it legs. And then there's at least one or more policymakers, lawmakers that are amicable and understanding of it and are willing to go to bat for it. And I'm wondering if there's anyone in our state Congress that you'd like to lift up that was particularly sympathetic or helpful.
Yes, certainly. Well, one thing, I'm going to just pull up some names, just so there's so many folks that I've been meeting with, and I want to make sure I get their names correct. But as I mentioned, the House Appropriations Committee met last week. And even though they voted to approve the grant because it was packaged with all of these other funding proposals, there were representatives who spoke up against it. Unfortunately, on the Democratic side, most of them voted to approve that package. And that's why I think it's important to give a shout out to the outliers, the people who were in the minority in their party, but they spoke up to do the right thing. Representative Jason Morgan and Representative Natalie Price were the two Democratic representatives who chose to vote against the package in the House last week before it reached the Senate. And Representative Morgan then continued to do some lobbying for us among his colleagues in the Senate, which I'm sure has been very helpful. There were a number of Republican legislators in the House who also voted to reject that grant. And, I firmly believe that this is not a partisan issue when we're talking about protecting water. We are all 99% water molecules. Doesn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican or independent or black or white or whatever. We are all bodies of water. Porcupine Mountains are the crowning jewel of Michigan's state park system. So, I went into it and encourage everyone to go into these issues, not thinking so much in terms of party lines, because we can find a lot more common ground than we're expecting if we leave the door open for that possibility. In the Senate, yeah, we had definitely loads of support from Senator McMorrow, she actually voiced her support on Instagram, which is powerful. Mallory McMorrow.
That was
Be
huge.
Yeah, she's got a large following on Instagram, and that is great. It's something that people can share, people can really put a face to their lawmaker and know that they are represented, that their heartfelt concerns are being heard. We also had early support from Sue Shink and Rosemary Bayer. Um, yes, there have been others as well. Jeff Irwin. Yeah, these are all folks who expressed support and confirmed that they would be voting no. And that's important because when you set the precedent that your colleagues are opposing this, then that makes it more possible for you to speak up and to oppose as well. And I don't even like that word oppose because things are presented as we're, very oppositional and antagonistic. Very often in the media, we are called the opposition campaign. But I think the case could well be made that Lake Superior has been around for 10,000 years. The Porcupine Mountains have been around for billions of years. It's actually the mining company, which is the opposition campaign in this case. We are just advocating to maintain the integrity of this area. So I, I like to try to frame things as positively as possible and just encourage folks to reach out to lawmakers, engage with the process, even if you don't necessarily believe that the system works. Historically, I am a person which doesn't have much faith in the system, but this campaign has done a lot to restore my faith because we have seen real results from just sheer quantitative participation of people engaging, going through the official process as it's meant to be engaged in. Never write off the potential for people to band together and make a difference. One thing that we're asking folks to do, anybody who has time, is actually to reach out to legislators, not just in anger and in opposition, but to tell them thank you, right?
Yeah.
Very often, our lawmakers are accustomed to dealing with frustrated constituents, but it's a lot more rare for them to actually hear any gratitude. And I think not only is that a nice thing to do, it actually has strategic importance. Seth, if I give you my gratitude, now you have something to lose. Not that we want to necessarily think about it that way all the time, but in the case of politics, when you're really trying to seal the deal, if the lawmakers feel like, wow, I'm now in the good books of hundreds of thousands of people, that will maybe keep them wary and vigilant if the grant or anything like it is proposed again in the future. So you can find all of the phone numbers to those lawmakers in our most recent Instagram post at Protect the Porkies. And we'll be encouraging folks to follow through on that again in January as well. But yes, there are many allies in politics and in the media. These are all just normal people, the same as me and you. Some of them maybe get steered astray by money, but a lot of them have their hearts in the right place. And that's why it's important to give everybody a chance.
Absolutely. Snaps to all of that, and you really nailed it with state politics. There feels like there's more possibility in terms of bipartisan solutions. We've had some wonderful conservation initiatives take hold here in Michigan that have been very bipartisan. And then also you mentioned like incentivizing things for politicians. Some people enter public life because other people encourage them to, and their communities are like, please run for office and try to make a difference. And people are willing to do the hard work of policy making to try to have impact. And then there is that other piece of it that has a lot of ego and power and corruption surrounding it. But even in that space, you mentioned this strategy. It's like some politicians are really going to do what's in their self-interest and what is necessary for them to do to get reelected. And like that's not necessarily intrinsically corrupt either. People need to stay in office to keep their job. But this has become something. where you got a petition with 300,000 people on it, that speaks to everyone. It's like, okay, this is the right thing to do. We're asking for moral courage. We're asking for you to maybe even risk a temporary sense of belonging with your colleagues to go against, you know, the current here and do what's right morally. But then if you have this groundswell of constituents, that speaks volumes in the political process and can be wielded. And I love the way that these narratives have been wielded in such a strong and confident way from the beginning. It's not about asking permission or thinking, well, maybe we should reconsider this idea. It's like, this makes no sense. This is why, boom, boom, boom. And the power of that has really spread like wildfire. And and it reminds me too of back in the mid 90s when there was oil and gas exploration on the Holy Waters track of the Au River, which is the beginning of the Michigan Land Use Institute, which has become Groundwork, one of our biggest and most powerful environmental nonprofits in the state. And Hans Voss talked to us on the podcast about that initiative. It's just like us. It's like a couple people coming up with some ideas, and then not that much later, it becomes one of the major talking points in all of Lansing. And Governor Engler at the time had to bring it up in his address, the State of the State address. And everybody loves the Holy Waters track of the Au Sable. Nobody's against that. And so you create this narrative, like you said, that frames the resistance as this horrific idea. The opposition is the empire trying to come in and colonize Endor. It's like, oh no, this is what we have to be proud of. The Porkies is our identity. And now we have these other stronger talking points that it's like, well, what's a bigger industry in Michigan? Copper mining or tourism? Tourism is so much bigger. And you want to talk about revenue, you want to talk about the future and the momentum of the Upper Peninsula. It's all in tourism. It's not in mining. You want to look at the scars of the Upper Peninsula, look to the history of mining in the Upper Peninsula. You want to look at the rising tide of the last 5 years of the UP, you know, it's very clear. So I think that going strong from the beginning and creating a narrative that is incredibly durable and very difficult for people across the ideological spectrum to take down has really created something that will carry this into the future. And like you said, I'm so excited about how this specific campaign will influence the future of the work that's required of us to protect the pristine wilderness, to protect the waters and the land here in the Great Lakes Basin. It's essential to humanity moving forward, and we need to take this movement very seriously and recognize our power.
Very much so. And I am very excited for 2025. This year we've had to dedicate a lot of energy to battling the Michigan grant. And I was fearing I'd have to dedicate my entire life just to battling this grant. And it may rear its ugly head again and we'll defeat it again. But for now, we're hoping to have more capacity to actually raise some other issues and address some root causes, inspire some more great artwork, and maybe a bit of music would be awesome as well. Just to give you a sneak peek of some things that we're hoping to introduce, which, of course, our main priority is going to be to continue resisting the development of Copperwood. But one thing that we looked into early on was to see if we could get the western area of the Porkies designated as a dark sky preserve.
Oh, great.
Because,
No.
if you've got to protect your dark skies, and the UP has some of the darkest skies out there, which is part of the reason I moved there. But if you've got to protect the dark skies, then that means there's also an incentive not to fill that area with loads of industry. However, we were told by the head of the state park system that dark sky preserves are prohibited in the Upper Peninsula. And I did some digging, and it's true. All of the dark sky preserves are in the Lower Peninsula, and there is a law in the books from 1996, which says a dark sky preserve shall not be established in the Upper Peninsula. I mean, to me, that just sounds completely insane. And I think a lot of people will agree that that is unfair. And the places with the darkest skies are the places you should probably prioritize protecting. We don't just wait for all of the night sky to disappear and then we talk about protecting it. No, we should be proactive in allowing, especially state parks and places with ample forests and ample dark skies, to establish dark sky preserves. So we're going to be talking a bit about that, both the night skies as something that's incredible for humans to be able to see the stars, which is our shared heritage with all of humanity for tens of thousands of years, and the northern lights, but also the effects of light pollution on the ecology. We don't often think about how big of an impact light pollution has. Another topic that we're hoping to explore more, because we're currently seeing a mineral rush all throughout the Upper Peninsula, not just in our neck of the woods, but there is mineral exploration being done in Marquette County and Baraga County. And the story goes way back. It One of the talking points that was made by the mining company and their proponents, such as Invest UP, is that we need this mine because it's going to revitalize the economy. But if mineral extraction led to wealth, the UP should be one of the richest places on earth, along with Appalachia and, Zimbabwe and places like that. So the fact that the areas with the most natural resources very often are the poorest, most impoverished places, at least economically, that should be raising a red flag for people that maybe that is not a sound argument that mines bring economic revitalization. So we really want to begin a campaign to delve into our past, to understand the history of the Upper Peninsula as a resource colony, going back to the fur trade, going back to the early iron mining and copper mining and timber when they just came through and logged basically the entirety of the Upper Peninsula minus a few patches. Those were all outside companies who were ransacking the environment and exporting the wealth to financial centers hundreds of miles away. Then they board up shop and they leave a void in the economy and they leave the ecology devastated. So Copperwood and a lot of these projects that are being proposed are just a perpetuation of the Upper Peninsula's marginal status as a resource colony. I think understanding that history will help us reclaim our presence and open a path to a better future. And that's something that folks on all sides of the political spectrum can get behind. Traditionally, left leaning folks want to protect the environment as well as right leaning folks. And nobody wants outside companies ransacking the natural world for the sake of exporting the wealth. This is really something that should unite all of us. So we need to address that root cause, debunk these phony narratives about mines bringing wealth, and see how we can open the door to a future that isn't based on boom and bust extraction, but allows for harmony with nature. The same as the native people who lived here for tens of thousands of years and continue to live here. The phrase that we hear again and again in the Upper Peninsula is that mining is our heritage. Well, whose heritage? The indigenous folks have been here since time immemorial, and they related to the natural world on a much deeper level that didn't require extracting every ounce of it for profit. So that's what 2025 is going to bring, along with loads more, and we're going to keep it positive and keep it fun.
Beautiful. I love to hear it. You mentioned music. I'm on board to write something and I'm open to
Yeah.
ideas. So hit me if you have any lyrics come through or like a maybe a chorus, like a refrain.
Okay. I'm sure you've probably got some lyrics already swirling around, but like one item not an item. That's not a fun word. One awesome thing we did last year was our poster contest.
That was so cool.
Yeah, we got, so many amazing original artworks and photographs. And I love to see people using their creativity positively. And it would be great to do something like that with music next year.
Mm,
Get some well known names such as yourself and others, but also just anybody who has written a song out of love for Lake Superior. or out of love for the Porcupine Mountains. Maybe to see if we can get some sort of compilation together, have a celebration through music of
Let's do it.
love for land and water. Awesome.
We will partner with you on that, and I will totally help get the word out. Let's go.
I'm glad to hear
All right.
it.
Yeah. Well, Tom, thank you so much for taking time. You know, as soon as that post went up about the news this morning, I texted you. You made yourself available in 5 minutes. Thank you so much for your dedication to this, your dedication to the earth, and your willingness to use all of your tools and to also learn from other people and work with other people and to cultivate unlikely partnerships toward a goal that represents something so meaningful to so many people. And I'm one of them. So I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Well, thank you, Seth. You've been in this game a lot longer than me, and I and many others have learned from your example and will continue to learn. And as you mentioned, and as I've mentioned, there's so many mentors out there. Let's all learn from each other. There are so many mentors that are not human also, right? The natural world and the elements and a beautiful piece of music. I'm going to get super poetic here if I don't stop myself. So,
Hear it.
yeah, let's just keep the vibration high, even though if we're dealing, you've accurately described with the spread of this corporate hellscape. But every great movie has a pretty sinister villain involved, right? So let's use any negativity as a source for positivity.
Yes. Beautiful. Well, onward.
High five. Thank you, my man.
Thank you, brother.